So welcome. Today we are going to talk about how we lost the sacred feminine, what implication that has for us, particularly as women, with the rapidly increasing rates of women succumbing to long-term ill health conditions. And I'll explain a little bit about why I see a link between these two things and what we can do to start bringing the sacred feminine back into our world and how we can reconnect with this divine energy for health or healing in particular and happiness. So let's get started. I'm Linda. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you've not met me before, I'm a fibro warrior goddess, and I've been living with a number of inflammatory disorders for many years. I live and work in Darwin, a spiritual healer working with women with chronic illness. Over and above that, I do online work with people seeking spiritual development and healing anywhere. So that's me. That's me. That's enough about me. Okay, so let's talk about, this is kind of like an ongoing theme from my previous two lives talking about chronic illness in particular. So I was actually talking to my mum the other day, and she made an interesting observation, and I think it nicely sums up the whole theme of today's talk. And what she said was, it seems these days that we've gone from living in a society to living in an economy. And I thought, that's a really interesting observation, and it's something that has seemed to slipped in over time, particularly, if you look at mainstream media news and so on like that. There's hardly any reference anymore to human society and human community. It's all about markets, economy, global societal stuff in that perspective. What do you think of that idea? Does that resonate with you? Is that something that you've been noticing too, that, perhaps there has been a shift in, an unconscious shift in the way human society is portrayed these days, not so much as society and community, but more of an economic model, and the pinnacle of this economy is, of course, creating profit and earning as much money as you can, regardless of the consequences. So this, you can kind of guess where I'm starting to head here with the loss of the sacred feminine in this particular environment. So how do I know that the sacred feminine has been lost? Well, it is mainly because of the structure that we do live in. We see ourselves living in a modern society or economy, as my noted, where we seem to have become more disconnected from the natural world around us. We seem to have, and this is a collective assumption, that humanity's pinnacle is to be actually consuming and making more and more and more, rather than looking at how do we contribute to life on Earth? How do we contribute to the overall evolution of humanity's soul and humanity's being, in association with the evolution of the planet Earth itself? So this level of disconnection is really starting to show up for women in particular in the increasing numbers of chronic illness, such as diabetes, cancer, osteoporosis, arthritis, and then of course we get into some of the more lesser known but probably becoming more and more common things, such as fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, myalgic encephalitis. That always makes me trip over that one. These sort of things that there doesn't seem to be any apparent reason for why these things come along, but they certainly do manifest in many people's lives. And it's not just women, men are exempt. And just because I'm talking about sacred feminine, it doesn't mean that I'm automatically going, man is bad, masculine energy is bad. Please, let's get over that. There is certainly a toxic masculine energy that is leading world decisions at the moment, but that is not necessarily to say that men are bad and women are good. Okay, I'm happily married to a beautiful man for a long time now. Just bear with me, I'm a bit fibro brain today. So what I'm not trying to engender is this idea of masculine is bad and feminine is good. You know, that masculine needs to be brought down and the feminine brought up. What I am talking about is recognizing that over time, the feminine energy has been downtrodden, and over time, there's become a much larger emphasis put on analytical, intellectual, and masculine logical approaches to understanding the world that have become dismissive of the more feminine logic, intuitive, and what's the word, spiritual perhaps, understanding of the world. So there has become this imbalance in the energies where one has come to dominance, and as a result, the other has declined, and more than that, has actually been physically, mentally, socially pushed down over time. So this is in part what I'm talking about, this imbalance in global energy of, you know, that whole yin-yang dynamic has kind of really swung around, so that the more toxic element of masculine energy, rather than the beautiful, divine, healthful aspects of masculine divinity, are paramount, and all the other nicer squishy stuff has really been compressed right down. So part of the thinking that's brought me to this conclusion, sorry, I missed your comment. There's a loud intermittent noise happening. I'm going to turn my fans off. Just bear with me 30 seconds. I'll turn the fans off and see if that makes a difference. Okay, fans are now off. So, Kat, please let me know if that noise persists. If it does, it means there is something wrong in my audio settings, and I'm not really sure how to fit. It is persisting. Okay. Feedback. Okay. Right. Let me just make sure everything is off. That's it. It's better. Okay. It could be that I had another Insight Timer window open, and perhaps that was causing the issue. Excellent. Fabulous. Thanks everybody for letting me know. And well, hey, the techno gods are smiling on me. All right. So let's get back into the discussion about where I see this disconnect coming from and how I see it impacting women's health. So thanks, Kat. Yeah, let's celebrate having a win. I love it. So what I've noticed over time with women in particular is that there is a combination of things going on. You know, we are living in a fairly highly structured society that runs completely counter to our intuitive, innate, natural selves. So what I mean by that is we live in arbitrary timings and timeframes. You know, we have a generally accepted work week that is 9 to 5, 5 days a week, with 2 days off on the weekend for the majority of the world. I mean, obviously there are adaptations to this, but that's generally kind of the norm that we've ended up with. And this is as a result of, you know, those early industrial times of trying to make life better for factory workers who were working much, much longer hours than that. And so a standardised work week was introduced. But it's now been introduced as the norm, and we all take it as read that this is how humans live their life. They get up and go to work for 8 hours, and then they come home and squish in the living of their lives in whatever time's left over at the end of the workday. And then on the weekends, that's when we get together and have family time and do family stuff and connect and have community and all of those sorts of things. So when you look at where humanity has come from in the distant past to where we are now, and I know I wouldn't be swapping any of our modern technology to go back and live in those distant times, but perhaps there is room for bringing back more community and readjusting the way we think we have to live our lives, which is to work to live, rather than to live and enjoy yourself and do some work as well. You know, there's become a real imbalance. So that's part of the problem, is there isn't a collective agreement in the human subconscious that life happens this way. Okay, and that's how it is. And it doesn't matter that, you know, the natural cycles of night and day, of seasons and so on, flow completely discreetly to that. This is how we live our lives, and we take our holidays in alignment with fiscal regulations as opposed to seasonal invitations from nature. So sometimes there is lip service paid to having, you know, school breaks in particular are the ones that line up, having school breaks that line up with, you know, summer, depending on which hemisphere you happen to live in, you know, so that kids and teachers get to have their long break in the beautiful summertime. But then that's about it. We pay lip service. Aspect is when this idea that we have to get up to an alarm. This is coming down to a bit of more microcosm. You know, our life is ruled by artificial timelines, that the best time to get up in the morning is when you wake up, right? That's when you get out of bed, when you wake up. But many of us have our lives ruled by getting up to alarms because we have certain things done before we go to work. So, you know, we have to get up and do these things, get ready, go to work, get the kids in the car, drop off at school, go to the office, minutes late, get scowled at for not turning up on time, put in the hard yards for 8 hours of the day, race home, pick the kids up, come in, and, you know, and it's just this ongoing cycle of not fitting in to a natural rhythm that suits our bodies. And this really shows for things that are important in women's health, such as honouring our natural cycles when it comes to menstruation. You know, often we need to just soldier on even if we're feeling less than good. And if people are suffering with things like endometriosis, then the menstrual cycle is an extremely difficult thing to have to navigate in a framework that doesn't understand or support women's needs or women's natural rhythms. You know, if we lived in a society that said, yeah, actually menstruation is a natural part of your life and we need to honour that. We need to give you the downtime that's needed. If something's going wrong with that cycle and you're unwell with it, we need to look at how to support you with that, rather than you must ignore that that's actually a problem and come to work and do your job and sit here in pain and pretend that everything's okay. Okay, this is the sort of thing that I'm getting at. The other thing that gave me an indication that it was a loss of the sacred feminine is the fact that everybody, not just women, men as well, are born with innate talents or gifts, and that these innate talents or gifts aren't recognised in today's society because they aren't readily quantified. They can't be easily analysed and understood from an intellectual capacity. And of course, I'm talking about, the psychic gifts. And for women in particular, there are 3 kind of secret risk factors for developing chronic illness in a framework that doesn't support, understand, or recognise that our innate essence comes from the sacred feminine, and that we actually flowed in a way that doesn't get recognised in the current economic framework that is geared to human beings working to create more and value assigned by what you can accumulate as opposed to what you can contribute. So these secret risk factors are being a high achiever. And so the high achiever is someone who always pushes themselves often beyond, their physical limits. They tend to ignore what's going on in the physical body to achieve the things that they've set themselves to do. And it also kind of overrides, the natural stopping point that we have. And so things like this can lead to adrenal fatigue is a really key outcome for high achievers. Adrenal fatigue, I've just got to check my notes here, high stress that often isn't recognised because we tend to adapt up to increasing stress levels. And there is certainly a mindset that says the more stressed I feel, the better I'm achieving. And of course, I'm sure that you're all aware that that's actually a furphy, and that stress reduces the outcomes for what you're trying to achieve. And also reproductive issues can suddenly come to the fore. So this is one of the secret risk factors for developing chronic illness, particularly if you're a woman, and this is one of your traits. One of the other traits is being a highly intuitive woman. I'll just check my notes again. So this is someone, highly empathic. They are in touch with their intuition and, often know things without any clear surface. What's the word I'm looking for? I didn't realise I was quite so fibro-brain today until I started talking. I am sorry. So what I'm trying to say is, that highly empathic, they're able to reach into their inner selves and connect with the inner wisdom there quite easily and quite readily, and often unconsciously doing it. And so the highly intuitive woman can often become overwhelmed, particularly if they're in that open empathic state of being too receptive to what's going on for other people and picking up other people's burdens and unconsciously taking them on as their own. It's all very unconscious. But this kind of thing tends to happen for a lot of women, and it can manifest as fatigue, mood swings, a constant state of anxiety, and it can potentially lead to developing chronic headaches and depression. So being highly intuitive is also one of the secret risk factors for developing chronic illness in the current modern framework that we've all agreed to, that this is the only way we can live, right? And then, of course, there's the highly sensitive woman. And there seems to be an increasing number of people, not just women, who are being identified as being highly sensitive. And I think a lot of this comes from the fact that we are so disconnected from nature, that this highly sensitive aspect of ourselves, the gifts that lie deep within these, aren't able to be expressed in a healthy way. So it's all turned inwards, and that's where the unhealthiness comes from. So the highly sensitive woman is able to process vast amounts of information. And you can see, this is where that sense of overwhelm, where too much stimulation causes really intense pain, anxiety, and the need to withdraw and shut down. So, there is highly sensitive people have their energy field so highly attuned and the nervous system connected to that energy field so finely that they're able to receive information quickly and easily from many, many sources. So this can lead to hypervigilance, it can lead to anxiety, and it can lead to chronic pain. So once upon a time, like I said, these risk factors were actually gifts. These are innate gifts of connection. They are how we connect with each other. They are how we connect with the world around us, and they're also how we connect with the spiritual realm. That hidden realm of the divine, whether it is the sacred feminine, whether it is the sacred masculine, or whether it is the great creator, or source, or cosmos, however spirit manifests for you. These are the gifts that we, once upon a time, were encouraged to use to make that connection. And because we can no longer clearly understand or even be taught or learn how to make connections easily and safely, they become, what's the word I'm looking for? They become risk factors. It's not the word I'm looking for, but the risk factor is the word I'll go with at the moment. Okay, so does this resonate with you? Is this something that you can see in yourself? Certainly for, if you're like me, you actually have a combination of all three of those kind of traits. A bit of a high achiever, highly intuitive, in my early days, way too empathic. And yes, I was guilty of taking on too much stuff from other people. And highly sensitive, too much stimulation, and I've just got to go away, thank you. I don't like going to nightclubs, never have. And Laurie's saying, hence the fibromyalgia, I think. Yep, absolutely. That's totally you. Yeah. So the reason why it's a problem is because of the way we've chosen to live at this point in time. We don't live in a society that recognises these as being gifts that are actually something that's an innate part of human nature. It's just completely disregarded and often viewed quite dismissively. So, there's internal and external pressure to actually shut these things right down and pack them away where we don't have to look at them. And that's where you can imagine things start to fester. So we've created this environment in our being where things can fester, where things can grow, where things can go wrong. And then over and above that, we live in an environment that is not conducive to healthy living. We do live fast-paced lives. We do live in highly stressed societies. We do have our attention focused externally all the time about what do I need next? How do I get it? As opposed to how can I help myself? And in doing so, how does this help those around me? Okay. So Laurie's saying, when I try to follow my own time clock and limits, it causes more stress and a sense of guilt. I'm not sure how to break this cycle. Okay, Laurie, so do you mind me asking you a couple more questions here about, are you in a work environment that has specific timeframes where you must show up to be, present as a worker to receive your paycheck? Is that what you're dealing with? Or is it family constraints where you have to have people in your family at certain places at certain times? Do you mind sharing a little bit more about what's happening there for you without giving too much personal detail away? And if you don't, that's quite okay. Just let me know in the comments and I'll fall back on my story. And I'll just give you some thinking time and take a sip of my water. It's inherent in your nature. Okay, Laurie, so you don't even have any of that now, but it's inherent in your nature. Okay, so that actually brings me to the point of the talk. What Hi X, you're asking what that? I'm not sure if you're asking a question about what I'm talking about, or whether this is your way of saying hi. And Laurie, you have years of high stress in work. Oh, the image behind me. Okay, it's a oh gosh, I can't even remember the word. I'm using one of those virtual backgrounds, and this is actually a photo out of my clinic, and that's actually one of my candles that you can see behind me. Okay, so coming back to what Laurie was talking about, the purpose of sharing this information with you today was to look at how do we address some of these things. So trying to come back into our natural rhythms, into our natural cycles. How do we do this? What does it look like? And how can we sustain it in the face of the fact that we still have to function in this overall framework that everybody else is working within? And you know, it's accepted that this is actually how you function properly as a human being, and if you don't do it this way, then you're strange, you're eccentric, or there's something wrong with you. Okay, so all of those things have a high load of judgment and stigma attached that we can really do without. So let me just turn over. So let's look, Laurie, at, you were talking about trying to follow your own time clock and its limits. Okay, so let's look at what does that look like? How do we introduce that, particularly if we're in a role of, say, let's say it's a working mum, and you know, you've discovered that my health is declining, and if I don't deal with my adrenal fatigue, for instance, then I know that I'm on a downward slide to something more longer lasting and inherently more nasty. You know, at least at the adrenal fatigue stage, there's something you can do to really help yourself to start reversing the downward trend that you're already on. So let's say that that's the image that we're working with in this picture. Okay, so what it looks like to start reclaiming some of your natural rhythms, and of course it also depends on ages and stages of those who depend on you to make their world work properly for them, children, right? So if your children are of an age where you can start delegating and encouraging a level of independence from them, this is where you can change some of the morning routine from being relying on you to get everything done and everybody out the door to, okay, I'm going to have a little bit of me time in the morning that looks like a journaling 5 minutes, a meditation for 5 minutes, getting out of bed 5 minutes later because that's when my natural clock has kicked in and I'm actually ready to get out of bed. Then it requires retraining for yourself and those around you to understand that they are now their own resource, and that if these things don't get done, if they don't make their own lunch, if they don't get themselves dressed, if they don't have their breakfast, then they start their day like that. That's how their day unfolds for them. Okay, so there's a little bit of relearning and retraining everybody involved in your environment. But if you are already on the precipice of dealing with chronic illness, or you're already dealing with chronic illness, then this is a really important re-education process for you and your close ones to undergo. Okay, so getting back in touch with your natural rhythms is a re-education. It's a letting go of the old programming and putting in place new programming that lets you know it's okay for me to do this way because I've got some things in place that allow me to do it. Okay, so that's one part of it. The other part of it is if we are working in a structured work environment that says you show up 8 hours a day and 5 days a week, that's it. Okay, so you do have this very real parameter to work in, and this is one of the better outcomes from COVID experience has shown us there are different ways to work, that we can be flexible, that, you know, work arrangements can introduce flexibility back into our way of being. So if you've still got some work arrangements in place from that time in COVID that enable this, even better. But it's also an opportunity, I think, to have those conversations at work about, well, how can I introduce some flexibility into my work arrangement? Is there room to, can I have mornings at home where I'm able to wake up at the time that suits me best and still have a productive patch of time and still be producing to the same level as I would have done if I had forced myself out of bed an hour earlier, forced myself to get to work by whatever means it was, whether it's public transport or whether it's driving and finding car parking and all that sort of thing, and that, you know, to turn up at the right time on the clock to commence work. You're probably going to be more productive if you've had that extra 30 or 40 minutes in bed, or the extra hour or whatever it is, had the opportunity to have a slow start with, you know, your breakfast and getting going, and then doing a concerted focus 2 hours or 3 hours or whatever it is to have lunch and then go to work. You know, so it's about you choosing or understanding, coming into connection with, what is my actual healthy, natural state of being? What does that look and feel like? Okay, how can I start molding and melding the framework that I live in to start accommodating some of the shift that I need to make to support this better? Okay, so Laurie, does that kind of make sense from your perspective, from what you were experiencing in what you were saying in your previous comments? Does that make sense? Is that something that would be doable from where you are now? It's quite a complex thing, this coming back into your own natural rhythms, and how do we construct that natural rhythm so that it's a healthful operating system for you to be in, inside the meta operating system that we have to actually function in to be able to survive in the current economy. Let's call it economy. I think hats off to my mum for identifying it's no longer a society, it's an economy. Okay, the human component has been really taken out of the picture. So we need to reclaim that human component, because we're all getting sick, and it's not just women. You know, men are suffering massive declines in their health as well. There are increasing numbers of mental health instances across the board and in all age ranges. You know, these are key signs that there is something going wrong with the way we are currently living. So we need to make some change, and making change isn't easy, particularly when you have the weight of collective understanding kind of pitted against you. So Laurie's saying it makes perfect sense. Yeah, the struggle is in letting go of the need to push and to surrender to the limits and allow it to be okay. Yeah, acceptance is a really powerful virtue to embrace, and it allows you to understand that today I am the way I am, and so I need to operate in honour with the way I am today. Tomorrow my limit might be different, and tomorrow I will operate within whatever that limit happens to be. But just for today, this is the way it is, and this is the way I allow myself to be. Finding peace with that is the key. Yeah, finding peace with what the limit for today is, knowing that this limit is just for now, because this too shall pass. Even when we live with chronic illness, and even when we're in the midst of a flare-up, this too shall pass. This is only for this moment. So allow yourself to be what needs to be in this moment. And then in the next moment, be whatever it is that you need to be then. Okay? So that's part of the learning to fall into your natural innate state. Is this being present in the moment and honouring what is actually showing up. We spend so much time forward planning, worrying about the future, or regretting decisions we've made in the past that we forget that we're only actually alive here now. This is the bit that matters, right here, right now. So the next thing I wanted to just share with you was, the stepping away from the arbitrary and artificial timeframes. So this is, again, really tricky, and it's hard to give like a generic, here's an approach for you to take, because it really does depend on each individual situation. So I'll try to give an in general. In general, our world operates to economic cycles, right? Obviously, the physical human operates to natural cycles, the circadian rhythm that determines our sleeping and waking cycles. If we stopped long enough to tune into the earth, we could actually start to feel the seasonal shifts and know which season is my most productive time. These are the times that I can have high energy and be focused and push through and do the do, knowing that this season is going to end and I'll have a season of downtime. The coming into the winter, the hibernation time, the time of rest, recuperate, the time when the earth lies fallow. Doesn't mean nothing's happening. It just means now is not the time to be pushing to make things happen. We need to reconnect with these concepts, with these ideas, and look for ways that these actually fit in a healthful, supportive, nurturing way in our current way of being. So what does that actually look like? Let me see if I can give you an example out of my own time frame. And I guess for certain respects, because I am now a business owner and I am in a position of calling the shots about when I work and how I work and what my business cycles are, I can consciously choose to align my work hours, my business cycles, and so on with my own personal rhythms, with my own understanding of the seasonal cycle in the area that I live in. I can understand, for instance, that for many people, we clock over into the new year, we have the end of our holiday period, and then work starts, work flows. That's it, I'm back at work. Being in business, what I noticed was my client flow didn't necessarily coincide with all the kids going back to school and the holiday season being finished. And, I've decided I'm back at work, so therefore the doors are open, let's go to work. It didn't work that way. What I noticed over a number of years was my workflow actually reignited and re-engaged with the Lunar New Year. So my business, I finally clicked after many years, and I'm a Cancerian, so it took me a while to work out that my personal cycle is the lunar cycle, and that my business operates at its best if I'm in harmony with the lunar cycle. So understanding when it's the dark moon or the black moon or the new moon, however you like to call it, that is the time for me to go into dreaming space, to go into that place where we lie quiet on the earth and honour the emptiness of the void, knowing that it's out of the void that new life comes. So you've arrived late. Does it make sense to take small breaks each day with a Pomodoro method to allow time to rest, reset, and then focus with more clarity, energy, and purpose? Yes, absolutely. And I would invite you to experiment with, rather than relying on a Pomodoro timer, to start listening into what your body's telling you. Start listening into the body's signals about, now it's time for me to take a break. Are you feeling stiffness, tightness, soreness in particular areas of your body? Are you noticing that you're reading the same line over and over and over and it's not making sense? I've lost my focus. I need a break to regain my clarity. So yes, using a Pomodoro is certainly a great way to maintain productivity. But if we're wanting to reconnect with our innate nature, our inner rhythms, then I invite you to start experimenting and just see if you can tune into, okay, now it's time for me to take a break, and see if it aligns with a Pomodoro time frame of 20 minutes. You might find that your work cycle is 22 minutes, or it could be 18 minutes. It's play with it and see if that makes any sense for you, and if that makes any difference to the way you're able to work. You might find that a Pomodoro session for you one day is actually 35 minutes, and then the next one is 20. So play with it. The best thing to engage with your own inner rhythms is to invite a sense of playfulness and curiosity into what you're already doing. So the stuff that the structure that you are unconsciously following, because this is the way it's done and this is how everybody else operates, and this is what all the gurus on, the productivity gurus telling you this is how you make yourself work better. Start questioning that. Is that true for me? Does that actually work for me? Is a Pomodoro session of 20 minutes and taking a 5-minute break for 3 hours a day, is that the best way for me to be productive? And is productivity the only goal I'm trying to achieve here? What else am I trying to achieve for myself as a person before I'm trying to achieve something as a business person or a worker with quite incredible pressures and demands on what you need to achieve from the workplace point of view. Okay, so invite playfulness in, invite curiosity in. So the third thing that I wanted to touch on today in relation to reconnecting and reclaiming the sacred feminine, these are just the 3 easy first steps. These are the baby steps, is to just reconnect with nature in a way that feels good to you. Okay, and so that could be gardening, but doing it mindfully, knowing that, how does this make me feel? I know that it's good for me to garden and I really enjoy it and I love having a beautiful garden. What's it doing to that innate part of me that I understand is one of those gifted aspects? I'm highly intuitive, I'm highly sensitive, I may be a high achiever as well. How is me working in my garden nurturing those aspects of myself? So opening the senses and bringing in that curious inner child to look at what you're doing. Why am I doing it this way? Does it feel good to do it this way? I wonder what it would be like if I gardened like this. What if I changed my planting routine to the lunar calendar? I wonder if that would be different. What am I noticing in the seasons around me? Now, the interesting thing is, I live in the top end of Australia, right? I'm in Darwin. I live in the top end, and we still seem to talk about, seasonal shifts of summer, spring, autumn, winter. That's the general Australian picture of climates in our country. In the top end, certainly in the Caucasian part of our community, we talk about the wet season, the dry season, and the build-up. It's like we talk about these 3 separate kind of seasonal shifts that we're aware of. But the local Larrakia people have a 6-season calendar. And when I stop still for long enough, I can actually start to tune into those seasonal shifts, because they talk about what they noticed, in their tradition of being in country for so long and being familiar with the country and noticing, what's going on with the local flora and fauna as the seasons change. So I invite you to investigate, what is the seasonal shift in the area that you live? Is it the borrowed seasons from, the British who came to Australia, if you happen to live in Australia? Is that what's governing your understanding of season? If you're in touch with the local Indigenous people of the area that you live with, and if they have things like, resources available for you to tap into, like what's the seasonal calendar of the local area you live in according to Indigenous law, what does that tell you? Can I start tuning into that? Do I notice this in myself, in my own garden, in my own park, in my own waterways, in the area local to me? What does it mean to come into connection with nature in a way that aligns with my innate gifts? That's what I ask you or invite you to explore. Okay, this is how we come back into connection with nature. And in so doing, we start inviting the energy of the sacred feminine to manifest more deeply, to well up from those wisdom centers deep within and start flowing out through us to heal us and to heal the people and the place around us, the place that we live. What do you think of that? I'd love to know. Are there any questions? Because I've actually reached the end of what I wanted to share today, and I haven't gone too far over time for a change. But I'd love to know if there are thoughts. Does this stimulate thoughts for you? Does this generate questions? Is there something in particular about what you're experiencing right now that you'd like to explore a bit more deeply? Brenda, you love this so much. Your nature walks bring amazing insight. They do, don't they? Yeah, absolutely. So I invite you to, those insights, can you extend them to noticing, from an intellectual point of view? I know I'm walking in a summer climate. So is it summer, or is it something else that local Indigenous law understands differently? That might be something to start with, to start exploring, extend, and to develop these innate gifts that you have, to start working with that. The idea of the highly sensitive woman who can bring all this sensory information into the body and understand it and generate knowledge and wisdom from all of this stuff that comes into our energy field, into the nervous system. How do we work with this? How can I generate a different understanding of the world around me and hence operate in a way that is more in tune with who I actually am deep inside? Okay, I think that's brought me to the end. And if there are no particular questions, Sai, you're saying on nature walks, landscape photography is a creative way to capture and observe the world. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And it's also a wonderful way to come back into the story of what was happening at that particular moment for you, to come back in and to tune back into whatever inspired you to capture that moment. You can come back and commune with that at later dates as well, and really fall back into that beautiful place of, I just want to capture this and be in this for as long as I can. Yeah. So, Brenda, thank you. I hope that this brings some additional insight. And Jamie, you got here late. The 6-season calendar is interesting. I feel like seasons don't seem to line up the same as I remember a few decades ago. Yes. And I think that that's a really valid observation. I think the idea of climate change, whether that is a man-made thing or whether that is something that is a natural part of the longer cycle of Earth, I don't know. But I agree. I think our feeling of time, our time senses are speeding up, and I think that, yeah, seasonal shift is changing as well. So it's a really great time to be able to practice these skills, to practice these gifts, you know, to notice these changes and to sit with that and try to draw understanding. Well, what does that mean for me? What does that mean for my family? What does that mean for my community? Is this guiding me to make different choices? Is this guiding me to shift my attention to something in particular? You know, there's so many avenues of information to explore. Jamie, you got here late. Oh no, I just read that calendar. Yep, comment. So thank you. Thank you. Okay, so now if that's all there is for today, that's certainly all there is from me. I thank you so much for sharing your time with me. I truly appreciate you being here and sharing your own valuable insights and to being open to receiving the things that I really dearly love to share about how we can not only heal ourselves but start healing the planet and bring things back into a more healthful balance. And when we come back into balance, you know, it's like homeostasis in the body. It's a dynamic balance. It's not just a static. Things come into scale and stay there. It's a dynamic shift and flow, and that's how it needs to be. At the moment, we've just got this, you know, the dominant toxic part of the masculine energy is really taking over. What we want to do is to be able to shift and flow, you know, to have dynamic fluid balance. We need to be in homeostasis in our bodies, in our planets, in our environment, and also in our governing body. Our government needs to have some more dynamic flow. All right, thank you so much. I could continue rambling on, but I won't. I appreciate the time that you have put aside to be here today. And if you happen to be available on Saturday, I'm doing a midday talk on Saturday as well. So you're welcome to join me then. Okay, that's all for now. Thank you very much. Namaste.